Brian has an ex-girlfriend he dated for 8 years. A week before our wedding, the two of them prominently traveled abroad to fulfill a promise they made to each other when they were young. To avoid being disturbed, Brian ignored all my calls and messages. Why do you have to be so insistent? I'm just keeping a promise. I haven't done anything to offend you. Fine. Stop holding on to this. I'll be back the day before the wedding. There's no point in you bothering me anymore. I decisively cut up the wedding dress and lost the wedding ring. But Brian regretted it. A week before the wedding, he left the country without a word and posted pictures of the trip in his friend circle. A trip to Iceland promised in childhood. Finally fulfilled with you at 30. In the center photo of a 9-photo grid, he and his ex-girlfriend Bonnie were cuddled up together, smiling under a magnificent aurora. Mutual friends commented, "I didn't get a notification that the wedding was cancelled. And, aren't you afraid Callista will be mad if you do this?" Brian replied that it was just a meeting. And he dared to post it to prove their innocence. Maybe it was meant to hurt me. Minutes later, he added another comment. "She's with me now. Only narrow-minded people get stuck in the past." My heart felt like it was being torn apart as the cold wind kept blowing. I was desperate for an explanation. But for the first time, Brian, who used to answer all my questions, refused to take my calls. And all my messages were left unanswered. Finally, Bonnie called. "Sorry, Callista. Brian wants to fulfill his promise without distractions. I was afraid you'd be anxious. So I came to tell you I'm safe. If there's something urgent, tell me directly, and I'll pass it on to Brian." With just a few words, Bonnie made herself sound like the perfect wife. And I felt like a clueless outsider. Ignoring the arrogance and provocation in her tone, I replied coldly, "Tell Brian to answer the phone." I heard a brief noise and a whisper of persuasion through the receiver. After a while, Brian answered, suppressing his anger. "Why do you have to be so insistent? I'm just fulfilling a promise. I haven't done anything to offend you." "Fine. Stop holding on to this. I'll arrive the day before the wedding. There's no point in you bothering me anymore." A man and a woman traveling together, being each other's first love for 8 years. Only a fool would believe nothing happened between them. "Don't expect a response from me." Brian hung up the phone directly. I closed my eyes, struggling to calm the emotional storm. Before my wavering heart could decide, Bonnie sent another friend request. As soon as I clicked accept, a flood of chat screenshots came through from Brian's perspective, from his classmates, friends, and private conversations with people close to him. I could easily piece together a cruel truth. The day Brian proposed to me, he had already started planning his big trip to Iceland with Bonnie. His parents, classmates, and even work colleagues all knew about it, everyone except me, who was naively immersed in the dream of marrying Brian. After sending all the screenshots, Bonnie delivered the final blow to my heart. "Brian left because he didn't want you to suffer. He proposed because he heard you had a new boyfriend and wanted to see if you still cared." The most devastating part, all these years, we've used holidays as an excuse to stay in touch. We never stopped. I could barely breathe from the pain. It turns out the so-called disconnection was just an illusion Brian created. He never forgot Bonnie. From beginning to end, that seemingly discreet Brian went against his usual habits and invited a popular influencer to livestream the proposal. Not to prove his love for me, but just to provoke the ex-girlfriend he'd loved for 8 years. "But Brian, you promised me unconditional love. You said sincerely that no one else mattered to you. That's why I dared to accept your proposal." After extreme pain, my reason slowly returned. I wiped my tears, steadied my trembling hands, and sent a message to Brian, who was thousands of miles away. "It's over. I come from a broken family and am someone who desperately lacks love and security." Brian impressed me with his extreme attentiveness. He noticed every mood, remembered every holiday, never let me sleep upset. In the 3 years we were together, he was always an excellent boyfriend, caring and responsive to everything I needed. Brian made me feel incredibly safe. He didn't hide his past with Bonnie. I could see everything on his phone or computer. So I didn't care about those 8 years. When Brian cautiously told me about it, I even joked to comfort him, saying I'd hit the jackpot. getting a boyfriend perfectly trained. But I knew, whenever it involved Bonnie, Brian was no longer calm and composed. Once, he took me to a class reunion. Just as we reached the door, someone inside said, "I saw Bonnie at Store K the other day. She was dressed so sexy I couldn't tell if she was a customer or a waitress." My heart sank. I instinctively looked at Brian, who stood beside me with an unchanged expression. Maybe the door was too heavy. Even after we went in, the veins on Brian's hand that pushed the door were still bulging. His oppressive aura was intense. The talkative classmate immediately turned pale and trembled like a leaf. Brian handled it with elegance, not even sparing him a glance. Just when everyone thought it was over, he found an excuse to take me outside and smashed a bottle over that guy's head. I asked why, and he smiled, saying, "That classmate used to bully me. This is payback." But I knew it all. Only Bonnie could make him lose control like that. And the time a drunk man harassed me, Brian just comforted me gently, then quietly found someone to take revenge later. No matter what happened to me, he never acted out of passion for me. But I fell for Brian anyway. So I convinced myself it didn't matter. I even comforted myself, believing that with time, our love would deepen, that one day, I'd be treated the same way, or even better. But the truth slapped me hard in the face. I don't understand how someone who's never let go of the past can pretend to be so loving and loyal. Brian called me after a long time. "Why did you go and scold Yua? I have to keep my promise. If you're angry, take it out on me." It turns out Brian didn't come to stop me from leaving. He just wanted to vent his anger on his former lover. I coldly told Brian, "I'll say it again, we're breaking up." Brian remained silent for a moment, then sneered, "There's no point in tricking me into going back to my country by breaking up with me. That's why you went after Yua. How can you be so cruel and manipulative? I'm telling you, if you dare take your anger out on Yua again, don't even think about getting married. Look at this, Brian, who has always treated me kindly, now wants to curse me with the harshest words in the world, all for the sake of his first love." No matter how bad our fights were, he always refused to say the word breakup. But now, he's threatening to call off the engagement. And I'm afraid Bonnie might get hurt. Before I could say anything, Bonnie was already sobbing breathlessly on the other end of the phone, saying, "Brian, you're such a fool. Don't fight with Callista because of me. I don't deserve you. Go comfort her." Brian quickly tried to soothe Bonnie, then warned me, "If you're against Yua, you're against me. A woman who can't accept my past isn't worthy of being my wife." Whatever love I still had for Brian probably vanished completely in that moment. I closed my eyes, held back my tears, and whispered, "You're wrong, Brian. You're not worthy of my effort or my love." In the middle of the conversation, Bonnie's crying grew louder again, and Brian no longer cared about what I said. I hung up the phone immediately. He messaged me on WeChat, saying he would wait for me back home and that our wedding would go smoothly. I smiled and wiped away the tears still on my face. I saved the recording of that call. Brian, you were never someone I could let toy with me. The matter between us isn't something that can be resolved by simply calling off the wedding." After thinking long and hard, I told my father everything. He looked at me without sadness or joy and said, "Impressive. In the end, all men are the same. But Brian is flawless in other areas. So I don't support calling off the wedding." I stared at him in disbelief. Just like 20 years ago, when my mom left after cheating with another man, I was just as confused as I was the day she resolutely abandoned me. My father's criticism continued. "The first day you brought Brian here, I told you he wasn't so innocent. You didn't believe me. You forced me to support him." I closed my eyes, my body trembling slightly. When I met Brian, he was still a poor young man with big dreams. For him, I bowed down before my father, who had held a grudge against me for years, begging him to give Brian a chance. I brought Brian to countless dinner parties to introduce him, mingling with dignitaries, even giving him money from home. But in return, once Brian reached a high status, he started longing for his old flame. Yes, not long after Brian became successful, I caught him late at night looking at recent photos of Bonnie. his eyes filled with endless affection and tenderness. I never once received a gaze so deep and complex from him. Still, Brian rejected all other temptations. He was nearly flawless with me, and I couldn't find any solid evidence of his betrayal. So I endured it. Now I realize how wrong I was. But fortunately, things haven't reached the point of no return. My father looked at me silently. He seemed like he wanted to say something more, but a work call interrupted him. Then he looked at me coldly and said, "I won't accept the cancellation of the wedding. Brian will be away from home for a few days. Stay in the house." My eyes widened as I watched my father disappear through the door. I knew this was a disguised form of imprisonment. Bodyguards and maids kept a close watch on me. I didn't even have a chance to make it to the front door. I walked slowly back to the bedroom, focusing on the wedding dress that had taken half a year to make and the diamond ring worth tens of millions. My hatred and disappointment toward Brian made me want to tear everything up and throw it all away. But I soon realized, since they want to trap me with marriage, I might as well wait until the wedding day and make a big scene. Once I made that decision, I no longer clung to the idea of escaping. Instead, I focused on preparing a wedding gift for Brian. For an entire week, Brian didn't contact me again. Meanwhile, Bonnie messaged me daily about her travels. Brian is such a dummy. I just wiped some cake off the corner of his mouth and he blushed immediately. Have you ever seen him like that? Today an old lady complimented us, saying we looked like a married couple. And Brian didn't explain, he just smiled and said thank you. You shouldn't be mad. Time flies. Today is my last day in Iceland. I'll return him to you safe and sound. I hope you treat my boy well. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot and saved it. Expressionless. After the plane landed, Brian immediately called to let me know he was safe. Brilliant. You've been really good this time. I bought you a gift as a reward. Let's open it together on our wedding night. Okay? His tone had returned to its usual affection, as if the person who had once been cold and cruel wasn't him at all. I held back my nausea with great effort. When I didn't respond, he quickly changed the subject with tact. Why don't you tell me about your travels? At the end, he gently added, after the wedding, I'll take you to see the snow on Mount Kilimanjaro. That should make you happy. Right? I chuckled. Brian is always busy with work. I had whispered that wish to him for half a year. And now, in this situation, he finally made the promise. He's always good at giving sweet rewards after a slap in the face. I composed myself and pretended I was still angry. If you dare to see Bonnie again, I really won't marry you. On the other end of the line, Brian let out a long sigh of relief and said, until tomorrow, my bride. He then hung up with an excuse. I looked at the ended call screen, a cold smile curling at the corners of my lips. Wedding day. I wore a wedding dress I made myself and walked arm in arm with my father toward the man I had loved for 3 years. Brian, dressed in a formal suit and smiling warmly, stood at the end of the red carpet waiting for me. But just as my father was about to hand me over to Brian, Bonnie, who had previously said she wouldn't attend, stumbled in. Looking a mess, tears in her eyes, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "You can't marry her. I'm pregnant with your child." Instantly, all eyes were on Bonnie. Brian's parents quickly scolded her. "Bonnie, this is not the time or place for this nonsense. Get out of here." The veins on my father's forehead bulged. He suppressed his anger and whispered to the security guard to remove Bonnie. But Bonnie reacted faster. She rushed toward me like a snapped string and dropped to her knees. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Ms. Callista, please, please have mercy. Give me back the father of my child." As soon as she said that, Brian, who was about to persuade Bonnie to leave, was immediately stunned. Brian's parents exchanged surprised glances, their expressions showing clear shock. Before Brian could respond, his assistant came running over with a grim expression and whispered something in his ear. Brian's explanation caught in his throat. He held the phone up to me, looking at me with hope and fear. "Callista, you didn't post this, did you?" I adjusted the hem of my wedding dress, lifted my head, and smiled at him. I had deliberately angered my father several times and then pretended to be persuaded by Brian, taking advantage of the temporary lapse in my father's surveillance. I created a presentation about Brian and Bonnie, attached recordings and videos, and scheduled them for automatic release the night before the wedding. My father still wanted the wedding to go on, but many media outlets arrived one after another, cameras focused on Bonnie, who was kneeling on the floor and crying, "Uncle, please let Brian go. Callista was born into a good family and is beautiful. She has many options. But I only have Brian." Bonnie clutched my dress tightly and said, "Callista, you come from a single-parent family. You understand me, right? You wouldn't want the baby in my belly to grow up like you, right? Brian, say something, quick. That night, you said there would be no protection, that you wanted to be close to me. You can't deny it." Bonnie cried again and again, reinforcing the authenticity of my revelations. If we hadn't hired enough security today, the reporters would have drowned the three of us in the crowd. Brian turned his head and looked at me with a forced smile. "Callista, don't listen to her nonsense. I've never done anything to hurt you. You're the only one in my heart." I smiled, quickly walked to the table, picked up a pair of scissors, and cut my wedding dress hem into shreds. Brian stared at me in shock. He knew how much effort I had poured into that dress. I'd spent countless sleepless nights refining the design, changing materials over and over, tweaking the model repeatedly. Before my father could explode in anger, I threw the ring hard at Brian's face. "The wedding is off. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. It's over." I took off my heels and walked barefoot through the crowd, leaving behind my father's roars and shouts. He didn't give up. He kept calling me, even threatening to cut ties with me if I didn't marry Brian. "Even if that woman is pregnant with Brian's child, so what? You must be the one to bear his children." I was stunned. A bold suspicion crossed my mind. I asked my father, "You already knew Brian cheated on me, didn't you? You're pushing me into the fire." My father snorted indifferently. "I've told you, all men in the world are the same. As long as you don't mind such things. Brian is a qualified partner. Our businesses are deeply intertwined. Go back soon and get ready for the press conference. I'll just say you had a small dispute with Brian. As long as you cooperate, Bonnie's matter can be handled easily." I gripped my phone tightly, a chill running down my spine. After my mother left me, my father never remarried. He just kept changing girlfriends one after another. He knew I hated him, so he used money to compensate me. Brian's appearance helped repair part of our broken relationship. But what I didn't expect was that they had already formed a shared interest behind my back, and I had become the decorative link between them. I thought making Bonnie cause a scene at the wedding would sever my ties with Brian. But I didn't expect my father not to stand on my side. For the sake of mutual interests, he pushed me into the abyss. I asked the person investigating Bonnie to tell me. In the years after she broke up with Brian, she lingered among the wealthy and even tried to contact Brian, who had risen thanks to our family. But strangely, it wasn't until half a year ago that Brian privately met with Bonnie. So, when Bonnie and Brian returned to China, I offered her $5 million to test her. I wanted her to disappear from both my life and Brian's forever. Bonnie rejected it without hesitation and said she only loved Brian. I deliberately provoked her. "Don't dream. Even if there's something between you two, I'm still marrying Brian. As long as I get pregnant quickly, I'll secure my position as Brian's wife. The money he spent on you, I'm taking it back." In truth, mistresses aren't afraid of being confronted by the original wife. They fear the wife refusing to give up her place. I even invited those media outlets on purpose. The goal was to publicly disgrace both companies. I was fine with destroying my marriage to Brian. But even then, Brian's father still tried to persuade me to reconcile. Just as I fell into deep despair, I received a strange phone call. "Callista, it's me." The soft and steady tone made my heart skip a beat. On the other end of the line, it seemed to be my mother, who had left home many years ago, and her next words confirmed my guess. "Mom saw the news. My Callista has suffered so much." The tears I had managed to hold back finally overflowed again. So many times I had imagined reuniting with my mother. I thought I'd be angry, curse her, shout at her to leave. But instead I just cried silently. She responded gently. "Mom is on her way. Is the restaurant you loved as a child still open?" though I knew she couldn't see me. I nodded desperately, choking on sobs. "Open it, I'll wait for you there." After so many years, I sat again in that restaurant with my mother. The place had been expanded. The decor had changed, but the taste was exactly as I remembered. I stared at my smiling mother and asked, "You had your reasons for leaving me, didn't you?" Mom was silent for a moment, then finally nodded. "After finding out your father cheated on me, I hit him with my car. Though the injury wasn't serious. I don't know if it was divine justice, but he lost his fertility." Hearing my mother's words, I couldn't help but widen my eyes. No wonder my father never remarried. It turns out I could only ever be his one and only child. He'd worked so hard to repair our relationship all these years. Until Brian appeared. That's when his cautious and tentative attitude changed. "Your father said he'd never let me take you away. Otherwise, I would have been accused of intentional injury. He gave me money and shares to keep me quiet. He didn't let me contact you. I thought he could only have you as a son in his life and would surely treat you well. So I accepted his request. But Mom has been secretly watching over you for so many years. So I rushed back as soon as I saw the news." "Brilliant. Just do whatever you want to do. Mom will always support you." Actually, I always thought my mother had her reasons. As far as I can remember, she took good care of me and never let me suffer any injustice. So I believed her without hesitation. The confusion and resentment toward my mother completely disappeared the moment I learned the truth. I cried and threw myself into her arms, apologizing over and over again. She took me back to the apartment she had bought earlier and said she would make up for the love I had missed over all those years. When my mother and I spent our first night together, Brian showed up at the door. No matter how much I ignored him, he kept saying unpleasant things. He stubbornly waited outside. "Brilliant. Could you please come see me? I took Bonnie to the hospital for a checkup. She's not pregnant at all. I promise I'll never see her again. Please forgive me, okay?" My mother and I ignored him. I focused on making a blueberry pie, but he was too persistent and noisy. A neighbor's complaint forced me to come out and meet him. When I opened the door, I was shocked by how haggard Brian looked. From someone in such a high position, I had never seen him so disheveled and unkempt. I originally wanted to take him to a nearby cafe to talk. But my mother was worried Brian might do something extreme. She didn't want me out of her sight. Even though I resisted, I had no choice but to let Brian into the house. As soon as the door closed, he knelt in front of me, looking at me pleadingly, almost choking up. "It was Bonnie who seduced me first. If you want to hit or scold me, I'll accept it. Just please don't leave me. You know how good I am to you. You'll never find another man who loves you more than I do. In the 3 years we've been together, I haven't done anything else to hurt you. Please forgive me this time." Seeing that I remained indifferent, Brian started slapping himself hard again. In the past, I would have rushed to stop him with a distressed look. No matter how bad the fight was, as long as he hurt himself, I would forgive him instantly. But now, I just coldly looked at Brian, whose cheeks were red and swollen. "When did it start?" Brian stopped moving. He lowered his head and whispered, "You had a severe cold during a party 6 months ago. So I went alone." He seemed afraid I would scold him. Brian quickly added, "You can't blame me. Your dad knew too." The mother, who had remained silent until then, suddenly sneered with contempt. Was it really that simple? Brian's face turned uglier. Hesitation and worry showed on his face. I ran out of patience and threatened him to speak if he had something to say. "Come back with me. We've already written the public statement. We also have evidence that Bonnie lied. As long as you cooperate." I saw the scheming in Brian's eyes. I smiled. "Then sue Bonnie first. When will she go to the police?" "I'll go back with you someday." Brian was instantly speechless. I slowly walked toward him and straightened his messy collar. "Brian, you actually met my dad first. He sent you to me, right? We have no common interests. My father planned to make you his heir." Brian's pupils trembled violently. He looked at me in disbelief but quickly regained control of his expression. "I won't admit it," I mocked. "Do you know who told me all this?" "Of course. It was your first love. From the first night you two were together. She secretly activated your phone. I saved a lot of things that shouldn't have been saved. There are chat records between you and my dad." Brian's expression turned ashen. He smiled bitterly and slowly lifted his head. "Brilliant. Strangely enough, I love you. I never intended to leave you for Bonnie." "Fine. I believe you'll soon understand what your father and I are saying. I'll be waiting for you to come back to me." "Done." He ignored my mother's scolding, turned around, and left without looking back. Mom frowned, watching me with concern. I gently held her hand. "Don't worry, Mom. I won't be foolish." Brian's appearance forced me to abandon the warmth of my mother's return. My father had also let me participate in group affairs over the years. But I was never given real power. Those high-level executives only greeted me politely as Mr. Kobayashi, and never engaged in real conversation. At first, I thought it was because they believed I was too young and inexperienced to handle such a big company. So they deliberately had me train at the grassroots level. But after learning about him and Brian, I understood. My father never planned to hand Callistas over to me. Instead, he cultivated a son-in-law who was more obedient. To be honest, I don't covet my father's assets. But unless my dad completely loses power, he will never stop plotting against me. And Brian betrayed me. He must pay the price. After understanding my worries and plans, my mother said she would fully support me. She told me that before marrying my father, she was also a workaholic. But after marriage, my father used various methods and excuses to push her out of the center of power. After I was born, he went even further and transferred their shared assets. My mother touched my head, smiled, and comforted me. "Fortunately, some of my connections are still useful. Even if you can't help us, it's still possible to provide reliable insider information." My father threatened my mother and me to force us to go home. He even deliberately posted online to discredit my mother. But he didn't expect my mom to publicly reveal evidence of his infidelity. She shouted arrogantly, "For the sake of my daughter, I not only chose to let you go, I also took the initiative to take the blame for the affair. Since you insist on making me unhappy, then I can only let this truth, which has been hidden for many years, come to light." Not only that, my mother also exposed the girlfriends my father had over the years. She never remarried all these years. And I haven't even spoken about having a boyfriend, because I refused to cooperate. Both families could only release evidence proving that Bonnie wasn't pregnant. That calmed most of the public debate. But this time, my father failed to shift the blame. He was nailed to the pillar of shame and lost his reputation. Dad and Brian were busy with company affairs every day, so we didn't expect more trouble anytime soon. What we didn't expect was that before my mother and I could finish gathering evidence and finalizing the plan, Bonnie suddenly came to me like a madwoman in the middle of the night. "Callista, please save me. Your father and Brian want to kill me." Bonnie wasn't someone we trusted. But after my mother and I confirmed that no one was following her, we let her into the house. She trembled for a long time before speaking, looking horrified. "Please save me and my baby. I'm only safe with you. For now." My mother and I exchanged glances in silence. Then we both looked at Bonnie and asked, "What are you trying to do this time?" Bonnie grabbed my hand. "Callista, you have to believe me. I'm not seeking your protection for nothing. I have something important to trade with you." I said nothing, just frowned at her. Bonnie couldn't bear my gaze. Trembling, she took out my phone and played a recording. My father's cold voice came from the phone. "Fortunately, Bonnie isn't really pregnant. It's already troublesome dealing with just one person. Just keep her around for now so I don't get into more trouble." Then Brian repeated, "Got it. I know what to do when the time comes." My mother and I were shocked. "What do you want us to do?" Bonnie's frightened expression suddenly turned vicious. She pressed her abdomen and said coldly, "I want them ruined. Put them in jail. First, arrange an abortion for me. It's pointless now. I don't want a child with such a horrible man. Also, give me $20 to arrange my trip abroad. I'll send you the rest of the evidence once I'm safe." That ended the conversation. She sent us some of the evidence she had saved. I found a trusted friend to verify its authenticity. Only then did I agree to Bonnie's request. During this time, Dad and Brian still tried to cause trouble for Mom and me. But luckily, someone from their circle warned us in advance, and we avoided any harm or loss. Although Bonnie isn't a good person. After we sent her abroad, she kept her word and sent me the remaining evidence. My mother and I quickly sorted everything. Although some of it didn't hold legal weight, the things my father had done behind our backs still shocked us. With that evidence, we managed to win over some key executives and shareholders. With proof and witnesses, we sued my father for money laundering and economic crimes that harmed many people. He was successfully sentenced to prison. Unsurprisingly, he'll spend the rest of his life there. Brian, as an accomplice, wasn't spared. On the day of the verdict, he asked to see me. I didn't refuse. As soon as he saw me, Brian cried and admitted his mistakes. Brillante. If there's another life, I coldly interrupted him. Even if there is, I'd never want anything to do with someone like you. Brian gave a bleak smile. If Bonnie hadn't appeared, wouldn't things be different now? I sighed softly and firmly shook my head. You should have known that the moment you and my father made that deal, our love was already a lie. I didn't care anymore. Brian, who was crying so hard, turned and left without looking back. Maybe he couldn't bear the thought of decades in prison. A few months later, Brian committed suicide in prison. And my father, who had lived a relatively peaceful life, couldn't handle the fall from grace. He developed a severe mental illness. One very ordinary afternoon, I received a letter from a year ago. The sender was the now deceased Brian. Brillante. By the time you receive this letter, maybe we would be married. And you would be carrying our beautiful child. I'm writing this to confess something. I was the husband your father arranged for you. So many mistakes. No real choices. I couldn't help it. But I truly loved you.